We have already transferred the world of Minecraft from the new version to the old, and from the old to the new. But we did it only in Java edition of the game. It turned out very interesting. The result was not predictable. In the comments, you suggest me to do the same only for Bedrock edition of the game, because it is a completely different game and it is not clear how the world will behave in this situation. Let's find out together which game world of Java or Bedrock edition will suffer more when switching from the old version to the new one. You're probably wondering, why not try to transfer the world from the new version to the old version first? It's all logical. Yes, originally I also planned to make 2 videos, but the Bedrock version screwed me over. The thing is that I had already prepared a new world that I created on the latest version, loaded beautiful territories to see how the world behaved. In the end, when it transferred the world from version 1.21 to version 1.20, the game told me that this world was saved in newer version and it cannot be loaded in this one. I have not found a working way to get around this restriction, so if you know, please share your knowledge in the comments. Our journey began with version 0.14. This is the oldest version that I was able to download. It is very unusual to look at the main menu, because there is still the old logo, Minecraft Windows 10 Edition Beta. Yes, originally this version was supposed to be an exclusive for the Windows 10. It's funny, but the game settings were completely transferred from the then existing Pocket Edition version for mobile devices. There were only a few configurations in the world settings: name selection, seed, world type, and game mode. Overall, the game's world looks pretty typical. If I hadn't been told it was one of the oldest version, I wouldn't have even realized it. What's cool is that the creative menu here is the same as in the old Java version of the game. The only thing that gives away the old age of this version is the biome of the ice desert. In the new versions, it is not generated, it was removed. I would also add that the first version of Bedrock Minecraft began to release in 2016, and they have already taken a full-fledged version of Minecraft as a basis, so there is no some ultra unusual generation. But I managed to find 3 villages at once. They are located at the distance from each other literally 100 blocks. The next version is 0.15, friendly update. Yes, it turns out that these stages of development had their own names, but in general it is even better. Jungle temples appeared in this update, and just in the last version I did not fully loaded the jungle and I thought there was a chance, but sadly there was no temple. But villagers began to behave more actively. Farmers were getting wheat as fast and as carefully as possible and put it in their pockets. For some reason it was still impossible to trade with them. That is, although they had professions, they did not sell anything. In general, the world did not change much. Then comes version 0.16, boss update. Due to the fact that Wither, Ocean Monument and Elder Guardian appeared. Yes, on this version it counts as a boss. This version already has the more familiar customization we're all used to. Obviously, I immediately set my sights on the finding the monument, but for some reason, even in the newly generated chunks of the ocean, it was not. But I did find the first signs that world was slowly starting to collapse. In the jungle biome, for some unknown reason, trees began to disappear. Only cut layers of foliage with the trees were left, and in some places there were flat trees. The next thing that awaited me was the full release, version 1.0, Ender update. Yes, at least somewhere there was an update with this name. After all, Java version 1.9, in which just updated the end, was called Combat update, but in this version I did not find strange things. The world was the same. The next version 1.2 is the Better Together update. This version was the beginning of the cross-platform path. That is, wherever there were, let's say, unique version of Minecraft, there was one common one. Players could finally play with each other on different platforms. This is where the weirdness started for me. The first thing I noticed was the generation of the dark forest. For some reason, it cut off sharply right below the level line. But at the same time, the foliage of the trees was not cut. In some places, there were holes with water and in them almost buried plants. In my case, it was sugarcane. Sometimes you could see a small cluster of flowers of the same species. What's also funny is how the dark forest itself was generated. It appeared in small bunches. It felt like someone had planted them by hand. Next comes version 1.4, Update Aquatic Phase 1. You could say it was split in 2 parts. It was much easier that way. The first one was released on May 16, 2018, but the second one was released on July 10, 2018. You'll ask why we missed version 1.3. It doesn't exist. This is where we can go completely wild. Of course, I immediately went in search of those water places that I had already loaded in earlier version of the game. At first glance, everything seems to be very good. The coral reef biome appeared on the old terrain. Even a shipwreck was generated. I decided to go back to my main spawn and see what happened there. The problem started with the swamp. Some of the giant mushrooms that grew in this biome were missing their stems, and some had their caps cut off. Some sloppy mushroom picker had picked these mushrooms. In some places, the trees had disappeared altogether, leaving vines hanging from them. This continued all over the swamp. By the way, the triple village was fine. The villagers were finally starting to sell their goods, but I still managed managed to find an area where the aquatic biomes had failed. There was a clear line where the old and new biome connected. I should note that there were not many such areas in this version, which is not the case with the second phase. Version 1.5 is a direct continuation of the aquatic update, but this is phase 2. While the first phase was more than successful in terms of changing the already generated chunks, the second phase went wrong. For some obscure reason, the new chunks generated water biomes in a very strange way, as if they could not smoothly connect to each other. This led to the fact that gravel and sand seems to grab territories from each other, and they did it very straight. This made it seem as if someone had just dug up the sand and covered it with the gravel blocks to avoid leaving a hole. In some places, parts of the shipwreck had even been cut off. Believe me, this went on a far long stretch, and I was beginning to worry that now the whole underwater world will be like a checkboard. The icing on the cake of this madness was the ocean monument. Even though it was located in the relatively calm area, it was also cut in even lines as if someone had sliced it off. Not that this was a bad thing. Because of this, we could reach the sponges without any problems. But on the other hand, the Elder Guardians survived and just made it to the surface. It certainly looks very strange. Version 1.6 didn't have a theme name, but it was the version that still added things from the aquatic update. For example, the phantom or the slow falling effect and everything that went with it. There wasn't much weirdness in this version, except for the strange swamp biome. It happens to be located right on the wetlands area, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. And maybe it's even okay. Version 1.7 is a minor. Nothing much has been added to it. It is more of a technical update. That's why we shouldn't expect any changes. But just in case, I flew around, loaded a bit of territory and found a buggy village. Well, how buggy? It was simply generated on the water, and because of the world generator features, it built additional blocks under each house and crop farm. This is pretty much standard for both Java and Bedrock. Version 1.8, 1.9 and 1.10 did not affect any world generation in any way. They just started adding some things from the village and pillage update. I tried to find something, but no result. The world was the same. Version 1.11, villages and pillage update seriously changed the world generation. This is not a bad thing. On the contrary, the villages started to generate much more often and the world started to feel more alive. But a lot of mechanics were broken. But this is a topic for another conversation. This time around, things went wrong as well. Let's start with the fact that the same two villages that I met in the last version was successfully replaced with the new ones. But there is nuance. The potato and carrot farm was cut exactly in half, and part of the cow fence was simply missing. In some places, you could feel like you were in the dining hall of Hogwarts, for there were torches floating in the air. A few houses simply disappeared, only a small part of the roof was left of them, and some were unfortunately cut in half. The second part, of course, was vaporized. The second village, by the way, was quite ordinary. In it, with the exception of a few odd houses, everything was fine. Judging by the fact that the already generated villages had been replaced with new ones, the other villages should have upgraded as well, even the triple village. Well, how can I put it? Remember that buggy village? It remained untouched, yet the path from the old village generated a smooth line to the new village, but cut off somewhere in the middle. The new village consists of just one cabin, but what about the triple village? Unfortunately or fortunately, they remained untouched. For some unknown reason, they failed to become an upgraded version of themselves. I have a hunch as to why that is, of course. Perhaps in some version, the game stopped counting villages that were generated in very old version as a complete village. Therefore, in this update, the world generated counted so old villages for the players' buildings and did not upgrade them. You got it right, I skipped version 1.12, 1.13 and 1.14. In them, nothing changed dramatically, and the world remained as it was before. I didn't want to waste your time. Version 1.15 for Bedrock does not exist. They wanted to roughly say catch up Java version of the game, so that the version of these two editions have the same two first numbers. That's why version 1.16 is the Nether update. As soon as I appeared in the world, for some reason a fire appeared near my portal. It was weird. In the Nether, of course, we had a crook generation waiting for us. The Crimson Forest, exactly like in the previous biomes, was just brutally cut off in the flat line. Strangely, but even in the new chunks that were generated in this version was not all smooth. The Crimson Forest and the Soul Sand Valley conflicted a bit too, with the crimson roots and trees growing straight out of the soul soil. But overall, the further chunks appeared, the more familiar the generation became. With your permission, I'll skip version 1.17 and go straight to 1.18, the second part of the cave update, which just introduced new generation. As soon as I launched this version, Minecraft recommended that I play the Ice Age DLC, as if it's a hint of something. Then, as soon as I tried to launch my world, a warning popped up that this version would change the generation and I should make a backup before converting. The first thing I instantly started to notice was problems. Not far from the triple village in the swamp biomes began to appear small islands with the ice lakes, although they were not there before. A little further from this place just took and appeared snowy taiga, and in the place where it should not be. sea. Believe me, these biomes stretch for hundreds of blocks ahead, and from time to time even appeared ice peaks. Although this was only in places that were generated in the very first versions, but the further I flew, the more odd things I noticed, such as a completely old village in a small square island that is surrounded by ice peaks and snowy biomes. There is a reason I was recommended to play Ice Age in the beginning. Great immersion. Remember that buggy village? Suddenly there was a savanna biome, a pillager outpost, and a new village near it. Meanwhile, the same old jungle decided that they liked plant life and began to generate a bamboo forest. Although before there was just a regular jungle, only a small beach was left from the ice desert, and near it an ugly village. There were several of them. The caves were alright, they were completely normal, but in the old chunks there were still strange areas with the cut-off geodes. Version 1.19 is the wild update. I thought I wouldn't find anything new in it, but I was wrong. Now all the places where ice were generated, ice lakes or even oceans, for some reason started to melt, and in a very strange way. Just stupidly, someone took and cut out areas with ice in even squares, as if someone wanted to correct a mistake, but it turned out to be worse. By the way, this applies not only to water, but also to land where there was snow. It has also gone, leaving only an empty square which is still surrounded by snow. In some places the generation has gone other way and cut off entire forests and biomes. Everything was so bad that from the pillagers' outposts remain only their flying banners and training targets. The new mountains that appear in 1.18 seems to have decided they were too big, so they got smaller by cutting out the whole chunks of the mountain. Literally, they were cut as if someone had decided to cut a part of mountain exactly to the line, and not just one, but a whole mountain range. A little further behind these mountains, there was a similar situation, only here the holes were dug. It felt like whole chunks had disappeared and water had appeared in their place. They're a bit like the Farlands in some ways. I skipped version 1.20 and went straight to the latest version at the moment, 1.21. I thought that maybe in this version everything would change, maybe it would go back to normal, but no, everything stayed the same. In some biomes you could still find cropped old villages that hide behind the trees in the dense forest. A little obscure generation, but most of all, I was surprised by the biome of frozen ocean. It was so big that I don't think I even seen biome like this before, and it's definitely not a normal size. In addition, it was completely surrounded by a giant mushroom island. It certainly looks very beautiful. Okay, so what do we have in the result? Which edition's game world suffered the most, Java or Bedrock? In my humble opinion, both worlds suffered equally. Write in the comments which edition in your opinion ruined the world more. That is, if you ported your world from the oldest version of Minecraft to the new one, then most likely, instead of a familiar game world, you have a Frankenstein. This is quite sad, and I am afraid to imagine what will happen to the game worlds next. We have yet to find out. While you're waiting for the new video, I advise you to watch this, they are also very interesting. Subscribe to this channel, put thumbs up and click on the bell. We'll hear from you again because we're discovering Minecraft in a new way.